Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. Page 380. 8 November, Year of the Depend Adult Undergarment. Gaudiamus Agitor. If it's all that Mario Incandenza's first halfway coherent film cartridge, a 48-minute job shot 3 summers back in the carefully decorated janitor closet of Subdorm B with his head-mount Bolex H64 and foot treadle, if it's odd that Mario's first finished entertainment consists of a film of a puppet show, like a kid's puppet show, then it probably seems even odder that the film's proven to be way more popular with E.T.A's adults and adolescents than it is with the woefully historically underinformed children it had first been made for. It's proof so popular that it gets shown annually now, every 11/8 Continental Interdependence Day. On a wide-beam cartridge projector and stand-up screen in the E.T.A. dining room after supper. It's part of the gala but rather ironic annual celebration of I-Day at an academy whose founder had married a Canadian, and it usually gets underway about 19:30 hours, the film, and everybody gathers in the dining hall and watches it, and by Charles Tavis's festive fiat, everybody gets to two-handed snack instead of squeezing tennis balls while they watch. And not only that, but normal E.T.A. dietary regulations are for an hour completely suspended, and Mrs. Clark, the dietitian out in the kitchen, a former 4-star dessert chef, normally relegated here to protein conveyors and ways to vary complex carbs, Mrs. Clark gets to put on her floppy white chef's hat and just go sucrotically mad out in Westhouse's gleaming kitchen. Everybody's supposed to wear some sort of hat. Avril Incandenza positively towers in the same steeple-crowned witch's hat she teaches all her classes in every 10:31. And Pemulus wears the complex yachting cap and navel braid and pale and blotchy struck a toque with a kind of flitty aigrette. And Hal, a black preacher's hat with a stern, round, downturned brim, etc., etc. And Mario, as director and putative author of the popular film, is encouraged to say a few words, like 8. "Thanks, everybody. I hope you like it," is what he said this year, with Pemulus behind him making a show of putting a maraschino on top of a small twizzle of ready whip that O. Steese had sprayed on top of Mario's head mount, Bolex H64, which counts as a hat. When the dessert course's zenith has gotten slightly out of control near the I-Day Gala supper's end, these few brief words and round of applause are Mario's big public yearly moment at E.T.A. And he neither likes the moment nor dislikes it. Same with the untitled film itself, which really started out as just a kid's adaptation of the O.N.A.N.T.A.D., a 4-hour piece of tendentiously anti-confluential political parody long since dismissed as minor incandenza by his late father's archivists. Mario's piece isn't really better than his father's, it's just different. Plus, of course, way shorter. It's pretty obvious that somebody else in the Incandenza family had at least an amanuensic hand in the screenplay. But Mario did the choreography and most of the puppet work personally. His little S-shaped arms and falcate digits are perfect for the forward curve from body to snout of a standard big-headed political puppet. It was, without question, Mario's little square hush puppy on the H64's operant foot treadle. The Bolex itself, mounted on one of the tunnel's locked lab's Husky V1TL tripods, across the overlit closet, mops and dull gray janitorial buckets carefully moved out past the frame's borders, on the other side of the little velvet stage. Ann Kittenplan and two older crew-cut girls sit in identical snap-brim fedoras with their arms crossed. Kittenplan's right hand bandaged. Mary Esther Thode is grading midterms on the slide. Rick Dunkel has his eyes closed but is not asleep. Somebody slapped an ad hoc Red Sox cap on the visiting Syrian satellite pro. And the Syrian satellite pro sits with most of the pro-rectors looking confused, his shoulder taped up with a heatable compress, being polite about the comparative authenticity of Mrs. C's baklava. Everyone gathers, and all's quiet, except for the sounds of saliva and chewing. And there's the yeasty sweet smell of Coach Stitt's pipe, and E.T.A.'s youngest kid, Tina Echt, in her giant beret, gets to be in charge of the lights. Mario's thing opens without credits, just a crudely matted imposition of fake linotype print, a quotation from President Gentle's second inaugural, quote, "Let the call go forth to pretty much any nation we might feel like calling, that the past has been torched by a new and millennial generation of Americans," end quote. Against a full facial still photo of a truly unmistakable personage. This is the projected face of Johnny Gentle, famous crooner. This is Johnny Gentle, née Joyner, lounge singer turned teeny bopper throb turned B-movie mainstay for 2 long past decades, known unkindly as the cleanest man in entertainment. The man's a world-class retentive, the late Howard Hughes kind, the really severe kind, the kind with the paralyzing fear of free-floating contamination, the either wear a surgical microfiltration mask or make the people around you wear surgical caps and masks and touch doorknobs only with a boiled hanky and take 14 showers a day, only they're not exactly showers, they're with this Dermalatrix brand shower-sized hypospectral flash booth that's actually like burns your outermost layer of skin off in a dazzling flash and leaves you baby's butt new and sterile. Once you wipe off the coating of the fine epidermal ash with a boiled hanky kind. Then, in later public life, a sterile toupee-wearing promoter, an entertainment union bigwig, Vegas schmaltz broker, and head of the infamous Velvety Vocalists Guild, the tanned, gold-chained labor union that enforced those 7 months of infamously dreadful live silence. The total scab-free solidarity and performative silence that struck floor shows and sound stages from desert to New Jersey coast for over half a year, until equitable compensation formulae on certain late millennial phone order retrospective TV advertised so you don't forget order before midnight tonight type records and CDs were agreed on by management. Hence, then Johnny Gentle, the man who brought GERCA to heel, and then thus, at the millennial fulcrum of very dark U.S. times, to national politics. The facial stills that Mario lap dissolves between are of Johnny Gentle, famous crooner, founding standard bearer of the seminal new clean U.S. party, the strange-seeming but politically prescient annular agnation of the ultra-right jingoist hunt deer with automatic weapons types, and far left, macrobiotic save the ozone rainforest whales, spotted owl, and high pH waterways, pony-tailed granola crunchers, a surreal union of both Rush Limbaugh and Hillary R. Clinton. Disillusioned fringes that drew mainstream media guffaws at their first convention, held in sterile venue. The seemingly lasciviously marginal party whose first platform's plank had been "let's shoot our wastes into space" cusp a kind of post-Perot national joke for 3 years until, white-gloved fingered, on the pulse of an increasingly asthmatic and sunscreen-slathered and pissed-off American electorate, the CUSP, cusp, suddenly swept to a quadrennial victory in an angry, reactionary voter spasm that made the U.S.A. and LaRouchers and libertarians chew their hands in envy as the Dems and GOPs stood on either side watching dumbly. Like doubles partners who each think the others surely got it. The two established mainstream parties split open along tired philosophical lines in a dark time when all landfills got full and all grapes were raisins and sometimes in some places the falling rain clunked instead of splatted. And also recall a post-Soviet and jihad era when, somehow, even worse, there was no real foreign menace of any real unified potency to hate and fear. And the U.S. sort of turned on itself and its own philosophical fatigue and hideous redolent waste with a spasm of panicked rage that, in retrospect, seems possible only in a time of geopolitical supremacy and consequent silence, the loss of any external menace to hate and fear. This motionless face on the E.T.A. screen is Johnny Gentle, third-party stunner Johnny Gentle, the first U.S. president ever to swing his microphone around by the cord during his inauguration speech, whose new white-suited Office of Unspecified Services retinue required inauguration attendees to scrub and mask and then walk through chlorinated footpaths as at public pools. Johnny Gentle, managing somehow to look presidential in a Fukuoka microfiltration mask, whose inaugural address heralded the advent of a tighter, tidier nation, who promised to clean up government and trim fat and sweep out waste and hose down our chemically troubled streets, and to sleep darn little until he'd fashioned a way to rid the American psychosphere of the unpleasant debris of a throwaway past, to restore the majestic ambers and purple fruits of a culture he now promises to rid of the toxic effluvia choking our highways and littering our byways and grunging up our sunsets and cruddying those harbors in which televised garbage barges lay stacked up at anchor, clotted and impotent amid undulating clouds of pot-bellied gulls and those disgusting blue-bodied flies that live on shit. First U.S. president ever to say shit, publicly, shuddering. Rusty-bulled barges cruising up and down petroleated coastlines or laying up reeky and stacked and emitting CO as they await the opening of new landfills and toxic repositories the people demanded in every area but their own. The Johnny Gentle, whose CUSP had been totally upfront about seeing American renewal as an essentially aesthetic affair. The Johnny Gentle who promised to be the possibly sometimes unpopular architect of a more or less spotless America that cleaned up its own side of the street, of a new arid nation that looked out for UNO, of a one-time world policeman that was now going to retire and have its blue uniform deep dry cleaned and placed in storage in triple thick plastic dry cleaning bags, and hang up its cuffs to spend some quality domestic time raking its lawn and cleaning behind its refrigerator and dandling its freshly bathed kids on its neatly pressed mufti pants knee. A Gentle, behind whom a diorama of the Lincoln Memorial's Lincoln smiled down benignly. A Johnny Gentle who was, as of this new minute, sending forth the call that he wasn't in this for a popularity contest, popsicle stick and felt puppets in the addresses audiences, assuming puzzled-looking expressions above their tiny green surgical masks. A president, JGFC, who said he wasn't going to stand there and ask us to make some tough choices because he was standing here promising he was going to make them for us. Who asked us simply to sit back and enjoy the show. Who handled wild applause from camouflage fatigue and sandal and poncho-clad CUSPs with the unabashed grace of a real pro. Who had black hair and silver sideburns just like his big-headed puppet. And the dusty brick-colored tan seen only among those without homes and those whose homes had a dermalatex hypospectral personal sterilization booth. Who declared that neither tax and spend nor cut and borrow compromise the ticket into a whole new millennial era. Here, more puzzlement among the inaugural audience, which Mario represents by having the tiny finger puppets turn rigidly toward each other and then away and then toward. Who alluded to ripe and available novel sources of revenue just waiting out there, unexploited, not seen by his predecessors because of the trees. Who foresaw a budgetary adipose trimmed with a really big knife. The Johnny Gentle, who stressed above all, simultaneously pleaded for and promised an end to atomized Americans' fractious blaming of one another for our terrible internal troubles. Here, bobs and smiles from both wealthily green masked puppets and homeless puppets in rags and mismatched shoes, and with used surgical masks, all made by E.T.A's 4th and 5th grade crafts class under the supervision of Miss Heath, of matchsticks and popsicle stick shards and pool table felt with sequins for eyes and painted fingernail pairings for smiles, frowns, under their masks. The Johnny Gentle, chief executive, who pounds a rubber-gloved fist on the podium so hard it knocks the seal askew and declares that, damn it, there just must be some people beside each other of us to blame, to unite in opposition to, and he promises to eat light and sleep very little until he finds them. In the Ukraine, or the Teutons, or the Wacko Latins, or, pausing with that one arm up and head down in the climactic Vegas way, closer to right below our nose, he swears he'll find us some cohesion-renewing other, and then make some tough choices. Alludes to a whole new North America for a crazy post-millennial world. First U.S. president ever to use boss as an adjective. His throwing his surgical gloves into the miniature inaugural crowd as souvenirs is Mario's own touch. And Mario Incandenza's idea of representing President Gentle's cabinet as made up mostly of tall, coiffured black girl puppets in shiny, imbricate sequin dresses is also, of course, historically inaccurate, though the honorary inclusion in that cabinet's second year of the President of Mexico and the PM of Canada is both factual and, of course, seminal. President of Mexico and PM of Canada in unison and green mask muffled. It is tremendously flattering to be invited to sit on the cabinet of the leadership of our beloved neighbor to the... choose one. Gentle. Thanks, boys. You have gorgeous souls. It's not the cartridge's strangest scene, heavy on stock phrases and two-handed handshakes, but the historical fact that the Presidente of Mexico and PM of Canada are honorarily appointed by President Gentle to be secretaries of Mexico and Canada, respectively, as if the neighbors had already become sort of post-millennial American protectorates, is foreshadowed as ominously by a wavered D minor on the soundtrack's organ. Mrs. Clark's Wurlitzer at home. but the two leaders' respectively dusky and Gallic expressions seem unperturbed under their green masks, as more stock phrases are invoked. Because budget and broom closet constraints make artful transitions between scenes impractical, Mario has opted for the interscenic entr'acte device of having Johnny Gentle, famous crooner, doing some of his repertoire's bouncier numbers with the cabinet members undulating and harmonizing Motownishly behind him, and other puppets bouncing in tempo on and off stage, as the script requires. Audience-wise, most of the E.T.A's under 12, cortexes spangling with once-a-year sweets, have by now emigrated hyperactively under the long table's tablecloths and met up on the dining hall floor below and begun navigating on hands and knees the special children's second world of shins and chair legs and tile that exists under lawn tablecloths. Making various sorts of puerile trouble, investigations from last year's I-Day are still in progress, with reference to which kid or kids tied Aubrey Delisle's shoelaces together and crazy glued Mary Esther Stode's left buttock to the seat of her chair. But everyone glycemically mature enough to sit still and watch the cartridge is having a rousing good time eating chocolate cannolis and 26-layer baklava and ready whip by itself if they want, and homemade raisinets and little cream-filled caramel things, and occasionally heckling or cheering ironically, every so often throwing sweets that stick to the screen, giving the smooth, sterile Gentle a sort of carbuncular look that everyone approves. There is much cracking wise and baritone mimicry of a president roundly disliked for over 2 terms now. Only John Wayne and a handful of other Canadian students sit unhatted, chewing stolidly, faces blurred and distant. This American penchant for absolution via irony is foreign to them. The Canadian boys remember only hard facts and the glass-walled great convexity whose southern array of ATH SCME effectuators blow the tidy U.S.'s northern oxides north toward home. And they feel with special poignancy on 11/8 the implications of their being down here, south of the border, training in the land of their enemy ally, and the less gifted among them wonder whether they'll ever get to go home again after graduation if a pro-career or scholarship doesn't pan out. Wayne has a cloth hanky and keeps wiping his nose. Mario's openly jejune version of his late father's take on the rise of ONAN and U.S. experialism unfolds in little diffracted bits of real news and fake news and privately conceived dialogue between the architects and the hard choice makers of a new millennial era. Gentle. Another piece of pre-tasted cobbler, JJJC. PM of Canada. Couldn't, stuffed, have trouble breathing. I could not say no to another beer, however. Gentle. ... PM of Canada. ... Gentle. So, we're some pot to go on the gradual and subtle but inexorable disarmament and dissolution of NATO as a system of mutual defense agreements. PM of Canada. Less muffled than last seen because his surgical mask gets to have a prandial hole. We are side by side behind you on this thing, and let the EEC pay for their own defendings. Henceforth, I say, let them foot some defensive budgets and then try to subsidize their farmers into undercutting NAFTA. Let them eat butter and guns for their own for once in a change, eh? Gentle. You said more than a mouthful right there, JJ. Now, maybe we can all direct some cool-headed attention to our own infraternal affairs. Our own internal quality of life, refocusing priorities back to this crazy continent we call home. Am I being dug? PM of Canada. John, I am kilometers ahead of you. I happen to have my term in office at a glance book right with me here. Now that the big frappeurs are being put down, we are wondering what is the date I can be penciling in for the removals of the NATO ICBM frappeurs from Manitoba. Gentle. Put that pencil away, you good-looking Canadian. I've got more long, shiny trailer rigs full of large men with very short haircuts and white suits than you can shake a maple leaf at heading for your silos right this very. Those complete totalities of Canada's strategic capacity will be out of your hair toot sweet. PM of Canada. John, let me be the first world leader to call you a statesman. Gentle. We North Americans have to stick together, JJJC, especially now. No, am I off base? We're interdependent. We're cheek to jowl. PM of Canada. It's a smaller world today. Gentle. And an even smaller continent. This segues into an entr'acte with continent squeezed in for world in It's a Small World After All, which enjambment doesn't do the rhythm section of doo-wopping Cabinet Girls a bit of good, but does usher in the start of a whole new era.